My name's Chris Evenden. I am the EVP of Investment and Corporate Development for Ryff. I'm here to talk to you today about how we are using AI to drag product placement, kicking and screaming, into the digital age. So first I'll talk about my background a bit and then the company's background. So it was actually really interesting to hear James's talk just now about fandom and the nature of fandom. I've spent most of my career before joining Ryff in video games. Firstly, running communications for ATI, which you might remember as NVIDIA's biggest competitor before they were acquired by AMD. Then I moved to NVIDIA and I was there for 7 years running investor relations there, which is a fascinating time working with Jensen and promoting his vision to the Wall Street. And then I moved to Electronic Arts and I did the same thing at Electronic Arts. And in all of those roles, dealing with fandom was such a huge issue for us. So it was fascinating to see how people are looking at that today and how we can move forward. And my background has something in common with the rest of the folk at Ryff. We have a mixture of video game people, AI folk, production experience, post-production experience. And all those disciplines are coming together now as we look to change the nature of product placement. Ryff was founded about 5 years ago in Hollywood. We have an engineering team in Cambridge, in England. We have another engineering team in India. And we have a global sales force around the world as well. And before I go into what we're doing to change it, let's talk about where we are today with product placement. Product placement is, I think we all know what product placement is. You know, we've all seen Daniel Craig holding a bottle of Heineken rather than a vodka martini. And it's one of the last holdouts in a digital world. Everything is done manually, everything's high touch. People go in and negotiate with the producer directly. And it's out of alignment with the way we live our lives today, right? We live our lives in a digital world, and brands too, when they want to interact with consumers, they want to lean into the cultural moments of the day, right? They want to be nimble, they want to be agile, they want to be able to react quickly. And so as a result, they've increasingly attracted to short-form content, influencer content, things like that. But you know, this longer form content still has a huge audience, and it would be hugely advantageous to them if they could find a way to make brand placements that are culturally relevant in a timely fashion. Product placement today is actually still a pretty big industry. It's $22, $25 billion a year, even in the old way, depending on how you measure it, who you ask. And this is a good example of traditional product placement. So here, McAllen has obviously done a great job of getting into Cobra Kai. They're front and center, and that goes out worldwide and will generate, you know, a substantial amount of publicity for them, hopefully. However, what they don't get here is the opportunity to change it. Right? If their marketing priorities change, they can't turn that into a McAllen 21. They can't turn it into Famous Grouse. And so they're stuck with that in perpetuity. And similarly, the content providers as well are stuck with this. Now they've negotiated it, it's great, it made them some money, but there are certain territories around the world, you know, several countries in the Middle East, for example, where alcohol is not allowed in content like this. So at that point, the content provider has, if they still want to appear to sell broadcast rights in those territories, they've got a choice, right? They either cut this scene altogether, which generates problems with the narrative, or they have to retake the scene without the alcohol in the frame. And of course, that brings its own set of businesses as well. And so there are some real issues here that can only be addressed if somehow you can edit that after the fact. And so as you look at this, product placement has been the same for more than a century now. And I think it's ripe for disruption. And it is being disrupted, even as the streaming providers are increasingly leaning into advertising content. You know, even organizations like Netflix, Reed Hastings swore he'd never add an advertising tier to his offering, and he's added one. HBO Max is adding one, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus. I think the only holdout right now is Apple TV. But given that they hired a head of advertising sales in, I think, February of this year, it seems likely that that's just a matter of time before they move to advertising as well. But the the secret that people are reluctant to talk about is that advertising is getting less effective. And that's why folk like NBC, which is the largest broadcaster in the States, folk at Amazon Prime are looking very, very closely at VPP, and they both, VPP, virtual product placement, and they both announced that in their new fronts last year. And let me dive into what I mean about advertising getting less effective. And I think we saw a bit of that with James's presentation, as well as how people today are getting increasingly adept at dodging advertising. I saw a statistic online yesterday that suggested that the typical American is exposed to 4,000 to 10,000 ads a day as they go about their daily lives. And further, there's another separate statistic that suggested that 75% of those are completely irrelevant to them. So when you're facing an ad load that large with content that irrelevant, it's no wonder that we've become quite instinctual in dodging ads. And that's across all media, even in things that you think of as being impervious, like live sports. A friend of mine in the summer, he organized a watch party for the men's finals at Wimbledon. We dutifully trotted around there, and every time we got to an ad break, he would speak into his controller and say, skip forward 76 seconds. Oddly specific time, but experience had taught him that that was exactly the time of an ad break, because we were watching on a catch-up. So we watched the entire match without seeing a single ad break. And it gets even harder to reach Gen Z and Gen Alpha. You know, I watch my son as he's playing video games on a console. He has a PS5. So he's playing video games on the PS5. He's watching a TV show on his laptop. And simultaneous to both of those things, he's also snapping with his friends on his mobile phone. And every now and again, on one of those devices, an ad will pop up, and you can bet his attention just switches straight to one of his backup devices at that point. So I don't know how many ads he's exposed to during the course of his gaming session. It's probably quite a lot, but he sees none of them. But because the ad server registers an ad being served, the advertiser gets charged for that, even though it has absolutely no impact. And so if you are a brand that can find a way of dodging ad blockers, of putting content, or putting your brands directly in the content, then you'll have a huge advantage going forward. And it works, right? So this is a campaign we actually did last December for Bailey's. And what we did there is we placed the bottle in 3 different Hallmark movies, Hallmark Christmas movies. And Diageo did some work, some analysis with a company called Game Theory to look at the impact of that. Those product placements only ran for a week in those, and then we switched them off again, so the Baileys disappeared from the shows. But during that week, they were able to measure a very distinctive and very material uplift in Baileys sales. And these metrics here, those are relative to the impact of a traditional 15-minute ad break. So you can see very effective, very cost-effective, very impactful. And so we can take content. We have an ingestion engine that I'll talk about in a minute. And we can ingest it, and we can basically create advertising inventory, effectively, out of nothing, right? So that doesn't mean we're going to put a MacBook in Casablanca, and it doesn't even mean that we're going to put a Starbucks coffee cup on the counter in Central Park as well. Because another thing that technology has to do is it has to understand the contextual relevance and has to be sensitive to the environment in which it's being placed. And I'll talk a bit more about the AI in a minute, because I think that's probably the most interesting element for this audience. Let me skip over that in the nature of time. Building a model, I mentioned that some of us have gaming backgrounds, and so we understand how to build models, we understand how to place them in scenes. I don't want to skip over that too much, because there's actually quite a lot of technology in that. Not many people in this world are working with full broadcast quality content, 8K content, 10-bit color depth. And so there's a lot of work in getting that right, and we shouldn't underestimate how hard that is. Here's an example of how it would operate in practice. And you see here we've built 3D models for each of these 4 products, and we've placed them in the same scene. We've used our AI to extract the lighting from the scene. We've built a realistic 3D model, and then we've placed it in the scene. We've lit it, we've color matched it, and put it there. And so you can see, Fairy Liquid. Mostly European audience here, so probably you'll recognize Fairy Liquid. If I was in the US, no one would recognize that brand, right? It doesn't exist in the US, but we could put Dawn a dishwasher liquid, dish soap in that same place. And before moving on from this slide, though, I think there's one other point I'd like to make. I don't know how many of you reacted to the fact that there's a beer bottle in that scene. In reality, our technology makes sure that can't happen, because when we ingest the content, the AI engine tags it with a whole bunch of metadata, and we can go into as much depth as you like on this, but basically it does more than like see that there's a person in the scene. It understands what's going on in the scene. And in this case, we know we've got speech recognition in there, so we know they're talking about going to school. We know it's the morning. We know there's a child in the scene. And so Stella would not even be served up with the opportunity to place this product in the scene. They wouldn't even see this placement opportunity. And product placement isn't as neatly defined as a 15-second ad spot, right? There are grades of product placement. Some will have more like focused attention, and some will be in the background. And so clearly we had to come up with the technology to understand where people are looking, so that we can grade them. We have like a very simple bronze, silver, gold grading. And so that tells the advertiser what they're going to get, and it also tells the content owner, gives the content owner an indication of the value of the placement opportunity that they have, and so they can charge appropriately for that. And that doesn't mean putting the bottle right in front of people. Obviously that would get people noticed, but it would also break the immersion, and it wouldn't be authentic, it wouldn't be contextually sensitive, and so that's something you want to avoid as well. At this point, I would love to run the scene in Wayne's World. I don't know if anyone knows the scene in Wayne's World where they're all holding the products up. That's something that we would never do, because that breaks the immersion. And so here's that technology in action for Bailey's. This is one of the Hallmark movies. We figure out where the attention of the viewer is going to be, and then we find an appropriate place to place the bottle. And this is all automated by the AI engine, this engine that we call Scene Intelligence. It's more on the same. And the thing that the AI enables this whole business model, because without AI, we couldn't do this at scale, right? To have a platform that sells at scale to brands and advertisers, we have to ingest an enormous amount of content. We have to have an enormous data repository of virtual placement opportunities. And so you need to automate that in some way. And that's what we're doing. And so Scene Intelligence is our AI engine. It brings the content in, it runs several passes through to understand the content. Like the first pass just detects where the scene breaks are and understands the scenes. And that's actually a surprisingly difficult situation. Like, for example, in many shows, there might be a scene in the kitchen, and then it'll cut to a scene outside on the road, say, and then it'll come back to the kitchen. And the engine has to understand that no time has elapsed in the kitchen. So that bottle of olive oil that you placed on the counter has to still be on the counter, still facing the same direction and so forth. So we run through for scene detection, then we run through looking for flat spaces where we can place products. So that might be a countertop, that might be the floor, it might be a wall where we can place a poster, or it can be a TV screen as well. So for example, we could actually place a currently running TV ad on the TV in the content, so it can be running, it can be topical and current. Again, allowing brands to lean into the cultural moments and to be nimble as they try to reach out to their audiences. And we tag each of these scenes, each of these virtual placement opportunities is tagged with 7,000 pieces of metadata that describe what's happening in that scene. And it's terribly important to the advertiser to understand what's going on. Like, Head and Shoulders might want to appear in a shower, for example, in a movie. They probably don't want to appear in the shower in The Shining. And other brands have other requirements and controls that they put around it as well. And so Scene Intelligence absorbs all that content, it figures out what the virtual placement opportunities are, and then it squirts them into Sphera, which is our marketplace, which connects the advertisers to the brands. And I will speed up because I've got 1 minute left. So I will say that this is where we are today, and so you can go into Sphera, you can see your various product placement opportunities, and you can buy them. The ultimate vision, though, is to reduce friction to the extent that we can link this back into the demand-side platforms that media planners use today. And so we would be a seamless part of the media planner's existing workflow. And that's technology for the future. But then the media planner, as they are buying inventory for their new marketing campaign, virtual placement will just be one of the opportunities, one of the media that they can access. Excuse me. All right, I'll skip rapidly over these. This is the Bailey's example I talked about. Oh, this is just an interesting technology demo. Sales and their advertising agency asked us whether we could do something as complicated as a ring box and place it in content. And they wanted to see how quickly we could do it as well. So they didn't give us any content, they just said, go at it, how quickly can you return something for us? So we did this in 18 hours. And so this is just a technology demo. It never aired like this. But you can see here that it's completely seamless, even though you've got quite a complicated model with shadows, with reflections actually within the box itself, with self-shadowing. And because we've built the model once, we can place it many times. So we did, of course. We placed it here as well. And skip that one. Right, and I think we have a reel, but we're at time. So I think there. Thank you very much, and I will add more as we get to the panel.